Welcome to day 2 of CES. My name is Jeff Joseph. I'm the Senior Vice President for Communications with the Consumer Technology Association. We're the group that puts on CES. I hope you're had a great first day. I hope you have a great week here. This is the last day of our C-Space Storyteller session, so I'm particularly excited to introduce this panel. This morning's first session is going to focus on how the best marketers use technology to be there and be meaningful at every moment. Our moderator from Google will share some key insights and practical advice to brands on how to win the critical moments in today's consumer journey. She's going to be joined by panelists from Time Warner and Best Buy to take a look at a dynamic conversation on the new rules of marketing. But first, let me introduce our moderator, Margo Georgiadis with Google. As you may know, Margo is the president of the Americas at Google, where she leads the company's commercial operations in the US, in Canada, and Latin America, and she provides digital solutions to Google's large and small clients, no small task. Before her current role, Margo served as Vice President of Global Sales Operations with responsibility for operations and strategy teams, global technology support, and new businesses and local commerce. Prior to Google, Margo was Chief Operating Officer of Groupon, Executive Vice President of Card Products, and Chief Marketing Officer of Discover Financial Services, and she also served, if that wasn't enough, she served as a partner at McKinsey in London, Chicago, where she was a leader in the retail, finance, and marketing practices. Quite a resume. So with no further ado, let me bring Margaret to the stage, who'll introduce the rest of our panelists. Thank you and have a great week.
So good morning, everyone. It's always great to be here at CES. So many new ideas and ways to stretch our thinking. As I walk through the show, it's definitely the year for drones, virtual, I can't even say it, it's too early, virtual reality, and connected everything. So I have to admit that I'm personally really passionate. Anybody see those Pair headphones, the wireless ones? They're just simply awesome. I can't wait to buy those. But when I think about it, with all the connections that are possible today, our homes, our cars, health, even our pets, right? You start to think with all these options and all this data, right? It can feel a little bit overwhelming. Anyone here feel overwhelmed by all these things? And we ask ourselves, how many of these things are actually going to be meaningful? Are they really going to add value to our lives? And will they really scale? And I think as marketers, in the age of digital, we often have that same feeling of being a little bit overwhelmed. In this age of mobile, where there are so many ways to connect with consumers, an exploding array of options all along that user journey, which ones do we pick? Not only that, but we have a user that's incredibly demanding. They expect us to know who they are and what they're doing, and they want us to engage them far more personally than ever before. And our challenge as marketers is, how do we make meaningful connections with all these opportunities? How do we earn that brand love and get to those deeper business results? Because we can take advantage of that much more real-time personal connection. And that's what today's panel is about. It's about those mindset shifts that we need to make as marketers if we're going to win in this new age. And what we want to talk about is 3 big shifts that we would challenge every marketer. And we're seeing the leading marketers make that happen, and our panelists are going to go much deeper. The first mindset shift is about being there and being relevant in the moments that matter. It's not a new concept in many ways. Marketers have always been obsessed about being there for their consumers. But with mobile, we have a really big new challenge. We have to find those right moments. We all look at our phones 150 times a day. I don't know about you guys, but I looked at mine at least 3 to 5 times before I walked on stage. Right? It's reflexive. We can't help ourselves. But we have to focus on the moments when consumers are open to engaging with our brands. We have to focus on those I want to know, go, do, and buy moments, those intent-rich moments. These are the new opportunities to win hearts, minds, and dollars in this new age of digital. So let me give you an example. Unilever is doing an amazing job in the hair care category. And how did they get into this? Well, they saw this overwhelming shift in consumer behavior. They saw over 1 billion times a month where users were looking for help on hair care. And they weren't there. Other people were filling the void. Just on video, 97% of the content delivered to users was from bloggers. Only 3% was from brands. And they realized we have to go after this incredibly qualified audience, but we need to take a different approach. We can't start by brand. We have to start with the user. And we start with the user. We start with their questions. And then they created an All Things Hair YouTube channel, and they didn't create their own content, they partnered with those bloggers. They used their power and authenticity to create simple and approachable answers for virtually every hair care question. I don't know about anyone else here, but I love using this app. I can sit in the bathroom at my hotel room at the Aria, and if I want to figure out how to get the frizz out of my hair, right, I can look it up right then and there. And it's on my phone, and I can sit in front of the bathroom mirror, and it's unbelievably helpful. And it shows me actually exactly what to do and how to get the outcome I'm looking for. And these are the kinds of things as marketers we need to do to pivot to this new world and be where our users are. And it's a big commitment for Unilever. It's taken them 2 years, but it's been well worth the effort. They now have the All Things Hair live in 9 top markets. It's the #1 hair care channel on YouTube, 160 million views and 600,000 subscribers. Incredible way for a brand to push their thinking. So companies like Unilever are ahead of the curve. We've all been used to being there, thinking about reach, eyeballs, frequency, share of shelf, share of voice, but this is the age for share of intent. That's how we need to meet user expectations on mobile. And it doesn't matter whether a brand or a performance advertiser, we have to commit to being there, to being relevant in those micro moments. The second big mindset shift is rethinking storytelling. We have to commit to making it far more personal and scalable. The old way was focusing on a 60-second spot. They still have an incredibly important role in this new world, but now they're just a chapter. We have to think differently in the age of mobile. We have to rethink stories and make them more liquid. We have to have them engage us differently. It's our most personal screen. And also we have this incredible opportunity for a deeper personal connection. In fact, when people watch video on mobile, they're 2 times as likely to have a deeper connection with that brand afterwards. So let me tell you the story of Electronic Arts, which is doing a great job of making this connection in this mobile world. Anybody here watch football over the holidays? I know I spent a lot of hours doing it. Anybody like to trash talk their friends? During the game, after the game? Anybody ever create a GIF? Well, they saw this happening. EA said, we see all these second screen moments. People are watching sports, but 84% of them are sitting there with their mobile phone and doing something at the same time. And GIFs are really popular. And so when they launched the Madden NFL 15, they launched it with the GIFerator. And it was an amazing experience for the fans because they took live content in the moments it was happening in all the popular NFL games. They put it into the game, and then they streamed it dynamically, and then they let users engage in it. They could actually add their own headlines and then share it with someone else. And fans loved it. Amazing experience, 9 minutes in that experience, and 400,000 GIFs shared just at the launch. It's a completely different way of approaching storytelling. Warner Brothers also is using a similar approach for their upcoming Batman and Superman movie. Since it's the morning, I couldn't resist playing a clip.
Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
You're gonna go to war. This may be the only thing I do that matters.
The greatest gladiator match in the history of the world. Son of Krypton versus Bat of Gotham.
Stay down! If I wanted it, you'd be dead already.
It's time you learn what it means to be a man.
Clip is the first in a series. So instead of just putting out the historic 2-minute movie trailer, they've broken it down into a series, and then they're drip feeding that story to an individual over time to build up that suspense. I don't know about you, but my stomach, tightened as I was listening to that, but it was short. It drew me in, and I wanted to see the next piece of it. And when we can serve that in sequence, they're also thinking about the fact that different of the heroes, Batman, Superman, even Wonder Woman, they appeal to different audiences. So why not tell that story in sequence for those different audiences? And then if I can see how you're engaging over time, if you are really engaged, why not show you longer clips after that? Why not let you drill deeper? And you can share it. And by doing that, enabled by programmatic technology, that dynamic storytelling in context as the user is giving us real-time feedback, that lets us optimize for the goals that are really important to our business. And for Warner Brothers, that's the most important intent to see and first choice metrics that drive opening blockbuster results. So when we think about what's possible in this new age, when we have to engage with users on mobile, magical things can happen on storytelling. And we don't all have movies to launch, but we do have great products and services. And we have to reinvent storytelling, make it more personal and scalable. It's a new way of thinking, starting with our audience, tailoring our creative to our users' context and interests, and then optimizing in real time. And this example ties right to my third mindset shift that I see the leaders making. And that's measuring around the journey. Mobile is part of our lives. And how we measure results has to shift. There's so many more interactions. And we have to think about impact differently. For performance marketers, that's getting way beyond the last click. Right? We can't just wait for that last moment because there's so many assist moments happening on the way to that purchase, whether it's online or offline. For brand marketers, we have to move beyond demo and reach-based metrics, and we have to think much more about qualified audiences based on intent and interest. And then, are they demonstrating engagement? Not just CPMs. And the pivot for the best are starting with business objectives and then working backwards. A great example of that is what Macy's has done. They've transformed their focus to the Omni-Channel Shopper. And why did they do that? Because they saw 5 years ago that people that shop both online and offline spent a lot more money. In fact, 8 times more money than someone who just shopped through one channel. And they also saw that people weren't visiting stores as much. They were far more purposeful when they came in. Shopping, actually, the footsteps went online. And in fact, those browsing and online footsteps were vastly exceeding the ones they were losing in the store. And mobile was the biggest driver of all those interactions. And so they did a big pivot. They pivoted to thinking, how am I going to own intent and win before the store as well as in the store? And aligned their whole business around supporting this omni-channel shopper. And it wasn't easy. It was a really big change. They had to break through historic channel silos. They had to integrate their data, measurement, merchandising, marketing, and budgets all together. So now, if you're a consumer and you go online and you're looking for that blue blouse that you really want to have, what they're going to actually show you back is they're going to say, that's awesome. And there's 7 of those blue blouses in the Macy's 2 minutes from you, in stock, in your size. That's an amazing user experience. And not only is it a great user experience, it gets great results, much better sales and margins from making that shift. So measuring around the journey is really important, and it allows us to move marketing from a cost center to a profit driver. And when we have this unprecedented opportunity to start with the user, understand what resonates real time, and optimize on the fly, we know it's critical to our success. So I've invited 2 marketing leaders, amazing marketing leaders, not just focusing on marketing, but how their entire business is leading into this future to go deeper about how we're going to win hearts, minds, and dollars in the digital age. I'd like to welcome to the stage Greg Revelle and Kristen O'Hara. So as they're coming up, I wanted to give you a little bit of background on both of them. They're amazing thought leaders. Greg is the CMO of Best Buy and drives marketing strategy, branding, and execution across all consumer touchpoints. He grows that business in-store and online. And prior to Best Buy, When he joined in November 2014, he was the CMO of AutoNation, the largest auto retailer in the United States, where he led a huge overhaul of AutoNation's marketing organization and platforms. And prior to that, he was the worldwide head of online marketing at Expedia. So an incredible wealth of experience to share with us today. Kristen O'Hara is the CMO of global media at Time Warner. She's responsible for fueling growth at Time Warner and its operating companies, HBO, Turner, and Warner Brothers. She leads the company's global data strategy and was a key architect of the Media Lab at Time Warner. And prior to that, she was a superstar at Young & Rubicam, working with brands such as AT&T, Sony, Yum, Dr. Pepper, and 7-Up. Very well qualified to push our thinking into this new age. So Greg, we just talked about how mobile is creating unprecedented opportunities in this new age. I'd love to start with you. I talked a little bit about that Omni-Channel Shopper at Macy's. You've done a lot of thinking about how the consumer is changing for Best Buy. What can you share with what you're seeing?
Yeah, we've done a ton of work. First, thank you for inviting me, Margo. It's awesome to be here. It's great to be at CES this year. And thank you all for getting up early this morning. I know we all had some late nights, and I hope you enjoyed the panel. I think from our perspective, we had a real crisis a couple years ago at Best Buy, partially with online, and I think you can think about it as omni-channel sort of more broadly. And what we did to tackle it was we really started integrating our channels, I think, earlier than a lot of other retailers really had to. We started doing store pickup, ship from store, and we were sort of the first major mass retailer to do that across our entire footprint. And then these days, it's really much more about integrating the experiences. And so, for example, this holiday, one of the things that we did was take what's a store experience, which is talking to what we call Blue Shirt, our employees, and we put it in the app. So part of our holiday campaign this year actually talked a lot about using our app, and if you shake the app, you get a live chat with a real trained Blue Shirt. So that's sort of an example of taking what is now sort of a traditional shopping vehicle. I'd say, the app is now a pretty common use case, and now we're actually starting to integrate that with people sort of behind it. And then I think on the same thing on the store side, what we're trying to do is get more and more data in the hands of our store associates so they can take advantage of a lot of things that we know about our customers. So we have to do that, I think, in order to win today.
And if you had to think about what's the single biggest shift that consumers have made lately, what would that be? What might surprise people to know?
Well, I think there's one thing. I think the big shift is just multi-device usage, so simultaneous usage across device. So you have the television being watched with the laptop out and the phone out. That's what I do. I usually have 3 devices sort of going at any given time. In stores, you have mobile apps and mobile web along with store shopping experiences. So that's a big change. And I think for marketers, that creates real challenges because we built our department. I think most marketing departments and operational teams, they're not built to really integrate all those things together. And so it's really forced us to really integrate all of our creative. For example, the creative you see in our stores, what you see in our app, what you see in our advertising, it's actually the same team now who does a lot of that work. So we look and feel the same way across all the devices. All of our campaigns are across all the devices. We have to basically repeat the same sort of campaigns everywhere rather than having a mobile campaign and a desktop campaign and a TV campaign. So that's changed a lot. I think the other thing that might surprise people is how much even the multi-channel dynamic has changed in the last couple of years. A lot of people used to talk about showrooming, and that was sort of the thing that was going to kill retail. It actually hasn't. And in fact, we don't really see a lot of showrooming anymore. And one of the reasons is we have essential price comparison across channels is largely consistent now. So the prices you see in a Best Buy store are actually pretty darn consistent with what you'll see online from ourselves and Amazon and everybody else. And where it's not, we price match now. So there's really no reason to worry about pricing. And so now it's actually much more about the experience and how we integrate it to get the very best customer experiences across channels.
So Kristin, you're a brand that's all about experience, right? It starts from there. And I think, you shared with me, I think one of my favorite series is Game of Thrones. I think we even have a clip. Can we play the clip?
We watch, we listen, and we remember. The past is already written. The ink is dry.
They have no idea what's going to happen.
So, I mean, I personally, if you don't watch the show, hopefully that'll motivate you to do so. As a passionate fan, I was really amazed and it made total sense to me when I saw you, when you launched your premium over-the-top and first ever in the industry app. You timed it with the launch of Game of Thrones. Talk a little bit about, why you did that and how that app's doing.
I think, if you think about the strategy from a Time Warner standpoint, we are all about creating great storytelling. And as much as the world around us is changing, that is core to who we are. But we also want to make sure that we're telling those stories in all the places people are consuming them. And to your point, it is about being in all the moments that matter. So the launch of HBO Now last spring was really an opportunity for us to bring that product to 15 million households who are broadband only, who had no way to access HBO up to that point. But what's interesting is that really wasn't the beginning of us embracing a mobile content world. 6 years ago, HBO launched a product called Hbo Go, which was really tapping into that need and understanding that consumers wanted to take their content with them. They wanted to experience it on all screens. So that product was a complement to your linear subscription. That has been growing over the past couple of years. It's in millions of households, 30 countries, and continues to grow today. I think as we look at what's happening in a mobile and an app-based content world, we have an unprecedented opportunity to understand consumers in a way that we never had access, and that's all about the data that we can pull from those devices, experiences, et cetera. So I think, some of the things that we've learned actually have been really interesting since we've launched the Now product. We're just about a year into it, in a couple months. Is number one, is that households, consumers who are subscribers of Now, who connect through a connected television device, are watching twice the hours of content from HBO. And that's pretty amazing, and I think supports the point that consumers have room in their lives for lots of screens, and we do need to make sure we're creating the best experiences for every single screen. The second thing is both HBO Go and HBO Now subscribers are watching, they're over-indexing on HBO original programming. Again, that's a great indicator for us to say that's core to who we are as a company and the DNA of HBO, and it's what helps us attract the best storytellers to our canvas. And the third thing, and probably the most important from a business standpoint, and I think one of the things that give people pause when they push forward and change and do new things, is the HBO Now service has been largely incremental to our business. We've seen very little cannibalization, and it supports the idea that we do need to keep expanding our audiences into new platforms and new distribution outlets.
So you've been a huge proponent. You created the company's data strategy. You've created the Time Warner Media Lab. You've really been watching what's going on with consumers. Can you talk a little bit more about all this data that you've been gathering and what you're seeing about that consumer of the future? How are we going to be consuming media?
Yeah, I think from a data standpoint, the amount of data that we're able to pull that we didn't before is tremendous. So it's fueling things like content personalization, how we manage acquisition and retention, even as you talked about earlier, how we're thinking about managing our large franchises. In recent times, we've now started to prioritize how do we move data from one business unit to another business unit, recognizing that our audiences have a tremendous overlap. So examples of how do we take data from a theatrical release and help to launch a new television show or game or vice versa. An example of something like that is last summer with the movie San Andreas, starring Dwayne Johnson. 2 weeks after we ran that marketing campaign, HBO launched Ballers, which also starred Dwayne Johnson. We were able to take a segment of enthusiast fans, poured it over to HBO for their marketing campaign, and that was the single best performing segment HBO had for driving tune-in to that program. That just shows the world is moving fast, and there's tremendous opportunity if we can make the data move. We're doing a similar thing with Game of Thrones, actually, with the Warner team, who's making the first mobile game. We're giving them a tremendous amount of data, not just to market that game, but to actually inform gameplay, because we can make a better product if we have more intelligence about the audiences that are going to consume it.
Yeah. You've also talked about some of the differences in how millennials or those beyond millennials are thinking about their use of technology. Can you share some of those insights?
Yes. So, the data and research piece is hugely important to us, as I think it is in a lot of companies, because as much as we're a content company, we're also in the audience business, right? We're a large-scale buyer and seller of audiences, so it's hugely important to us to know as much as we can, and hopefully more than others, about those audiences. Millennials and plurals have been incredibly important to us, and I'm sure they're important to a lot of the folks in this room. And I think, millennials, if we define them as 18 to 34, 35, and plurals is the generation behind 2 to 17 or 18, there are differences in those audiences. So some of the things we're seeing are around millennials explore when it comes to content, and plurals seek. And what I mean by that is millennials had to adjust, right? They grew up, and the world around them exploded in content choices and distribution platforms. And they had to get comfortable in that exploration. When we look at plurals, they're mobile natives. They've known a world that has been a plethora of content choices, distribution platforms, and they could swipe on an iPad before they could read. Before they could read. So if you think about them, they're surgical in their approach. They know exactly what they want to find, and if they can't find it instantly, they move on. They're done. So as a content company, we need to think really differently and to use data about how do we think about promoting our content and distributing our content to plurals differently, because we know they have different mindset. Another thing that we see too is that plurals are very thoughtful about curating their public persona, right? And so while millennials and plurals both use content and characters to self-identify in social media, what we see, though, is plurals are very choiceful. And so again, as we think about how do we build brand ambassadors and long-term fans of our franchises, we need to think differently about that generation that's coming behind.
Absolutely. That reminds me of a discussion we had, Greg, when you talked about shifting to a publisher mindset and thinking about those different audiences. Is there anything you're doing as you're thinking or looking at that consumer, those different generations that is allowing you to be more impactful at Best Buy?
Yeah, we actually don't look at things from a demographic standpoint as much. We've started there, but we've actually evolved a little bit. We're going after people that really love technology. So that's sort of our goal. If you love technology, Best Buy has to be the place where you go to get it. And so we've built our entire company and what we're doing with marketing and operations, et cetera, to put ourselves in that position. One of the things that we've learned about how to go after those folks is they love technology, right? So they want lots and lots of content. They don't just want a price. They don't just want reviews. They want to know a lot more than that, and that's why a lot of people go into stores. They expect to go in and get expert advice from someone who's experienced these products, use their competitive products, et cetera, and give them the right answer for them. For us, from a marketing standpoint, it means we need to build a lot more of that content before they get in the store. You've talked a lot, Margo, about how the purchase journeys change, where the decisions are really being made before people go into stores. So as a retailer, that means that all that sort of expert advice and service, we need to figure out how to do that online. And that actually puts a lot of pressure on the marketing organization, because we're the folks who create all that content. And so we've essentially restructured our team to really build a lot more information that we know customers want. And it's also changed the way we think about marketing. I think in prior lives, I've really thought a lot more about how do I sort of get my story in front of the consumer? How do I get out in front of them and sort of make them hear what I want them to know? And I think it's different now in that consumers can turn you on and off so easily. It's really hard to sort of capture their attention the way that we used to be able to. So before we even start a creative process, we actually think about, okay, what does the consumer want to know from us? Like, for example, at CES right now, the thing that we're really pushing, we think a lot of customers want to know, hey, when is all this stuff going to go on sale? What can you actually buy it? So a lot of the people here are talking about what are the great new technologies. I think consumers are thinking about when it's going to be available for purchase. And so our whole campaign around CES is actually around when is this stuff going to be available, which we think we can uniquely provide. But it takes a different mindset for our team to do those sorts of campaigns.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we move to that second mindset shift, which is about storytelling, right, and making it more personal and scalable, Greg, you've done a lot of things to really transform that engagement. You just shared a few of those. Can you maybe take an example and walk us through, like, how do you approach a campaign, maybe back to school or something that you've fully completed and you can share the results?
Yeah. I can't talk about holiday because we're still sort of in the midst of it, but we've done a lot this year. Really, personalization is a really big deal for us, and it started with email. That's sort of the quintessential personalized channel. And over the last 12 to 18 months, we've actually focused a lot on how do we take an email type approach where you can customize messages to individuals and sort of blow that out, not just in email and sort of your own channels, but how do you do it across the web and across people's browsing behavior outside of Best Buy. So for back to school, for example, historically speaking, we would do a big campaign around back to school, and that would be exclusively what we would talk about from, call it, the June to August period. And it's obviously really focused on students and their parents. But we also we have a lot of other stories we want to tell. And so this year we actually built 2 campaigns. One was back to school, and then the other one was appliances. It happens to be the kind of late summer is a big appliance season for us as well. And so that's one example where for a back to school type customer, we built a lot of media, we bought a lot of media and creative against customers who were highly likely to be interested, based upon us knowing they had someone who was probably going to go back to school. And then there's a whole different group of people that are moving, people who need a new, say, holiday kitchen, whatever it may be. It's a totally different group. We created a totally separate campaign for them. And so what we've done is created a lot more content to then go after those different need states, and then bought media sort of using the same data that we use for email to go and identify those customers across the web.
Great. And are there any results as you think about where you really see the benefit from taking those approaches? Is it that you're able to better channel the investments, get the right person? Are you seeing that conversion rates are higher? Or how do you think about that differently?
Yeah, well, I will go back to email because it's such a great, the analytics on email are so awesome. You can tell in an instant whether something resonated or not. And so, historically we would do sort of one blast email campaign with the same content to everybody, again, based upon what we wanted to sell. We've totally changed that. Now we have a whole bunch of campaigns running simultaneously. And what we'll see is we'll measure both how's our targeting, like how good are we at acknowledging customer X, like let's say Margo, if she's in the market for a home theater system, we will test whether home theater messages were relevant for you, and then we'll go back, put that in our data system, depending on whether you opened or clicked, to say, oh yes, our data was right, Margo was indeed interested in home theater or not. And then the same thing on the creative. We'll have multiple home theater creatives out there, and then we'll say, okay, this one was the best, this one wasn't so good, and then we'll constantly iterate there. So you have this constant sort of machine running to try to identify what customers are interested in what products, and then you have a creative machine to try to build the best messages against that.
Okay, so you start, so that concept of starting with the audience, varying the creatives, and then iterating.
Yes, and then we do that outside of email as well. So that's our challenge, is what we're really focused on.
So Kristin, you have some of the best storytelling properties, the best franchises you could possibly have to start with telling stories. But yet it's still challenging, right? The consumers have a lot of different content choices. How are you thinking differently about grabbing their attention, right, in this on-demand world?
Yeah, I think in a data-driven and technology-enabled world, it really gives us the opportunity to transform how we think about managing franchises. And if we think about kind of big entertainment franchises, what they really are engines for storytelling, and they're highly profitable. And when we manage them well, we can have fans for years, if not decades. So the whole opportunity to start to personalize at scale, which is a big opportunity, because we reach mass audiences, but not everyone is at the same time in a story, within a franchise, or within the life cycle of that franchise. So the opportunity for us to get incredibly precise and personalized, but do it at scale because of the volumes of data that we have. And to your point earlier, when you were talking about Batman versus Superman, we can look at the sequencing of that messaging over time. And when we look at a franchise like DC, which is a terrific example, we have one of the most exciting slates across Warner Brothers that we've ever had in our history. So Batman versus Superman is in March, but we've got Suicide Squad coming out this summer, and about 8 to 10 new movies from DC over the next 5 years. As of this year, we're going to have 5 DC Entertainment original shows on television, in addition to multiple video games, comic books, consumer products, etc. So this whole notion of engaging people through the life cycle of a franchise and going in and out of the different windows makes us have tremendous opportunity to have a very different dialogue with audiences and make it relevant to them and let the story unfold for them on their terms, which is super exciting.
So that is a huge mindset shift. When they can come in and out of these stores, they could never have been a fan, but they could be all of a sudden discover and become a fan, right, in this on-demand world. If you had to say, what are the 2 or 3 biggest shifts for franchise management in this on-demand world, what would you say?
I think, one is definitely personalization at scale. And that's something that's incredibly important. And there was a lot of trepidation within the studio about saying, well, is data going to make us too narrow too quickly? And are we going to drive box office that we need? And what we're seeing is we can drive tremendous scale with personalization at the same time. So I would say that. I think the sequencing of messaging is a huge shift, and we had a creative executive who said it wonderfully, who makes all the trailers for Warner Brothers, and it was about kind of, you can really separate out, what is the premium audience that we want to reach, when do we want to reach them, what is the story we want to tell them. So that ability to sequence versus create one trailer that's going to appeal to everyone and release it all at the same time is just a tremendous mindset shift. We have to create more creative materials from a marketing standpoint, but it gives us an opportunity to make it as relevant as possible.
And Time Warner's always been at the forefront of the social conversation, because part of what I've heard you talk about in terms of creating that passionate audience is making them part of the franchise, right? Feel it.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how you've gotten into that and any lessons learned for other brands?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest lesson is no one can predict a hit, and no one can predict what is going to capture the cultural zeitgeist, right? But I think that said, we are always focused on great quality content, so that is the North Star. And when you have that, entertainment by its nature is water cooler conversation. And so in an age of social media, we're naturally connected into the social dialogue. So we were very early adopters within the social media space. And I think when we start to see a show sparking, there's tremendous opportunity for us to really capitalize on how we can leverage social channels as effectively as possible, but to be really natural about it so that we're not kind of forcing that conversation, but really taking advantage when it starts to unfold.
So you've got all these new ways, thinking about a much longer life cycle for franchise, many more channels that you're engaging users. How do you measure all that? How do you understand what's working and not working?
Yeah, I think performance is obviously the number one measurement that we're looking at, right? So how are we doing and how are we impacting business outcomes? And I think, we can see that in real time pretty much, whether it's through ratings, subscriptions, et cetera. I think it's a lot about making sure that, I think something you had touched on, Greg, is making sure that the investment we're making in marketing is as effective as possible across that whole value chain. And thinking differently about how we allocate budgets, being more flexible as we think about that allocation over time, whereas it used to be kind of things were set. Now there's so much optimization in real time that as we're seeing results come in and we're seeing measurement, to really create an organization that can be nimble enough to start to make changes on the fly.
Absolutely. And Greg, I shared that Macy's example earlier about shifting the organization. Best Buy has also been at the leadership mode of making org changes to be able to embrace this new feature. Can you talk a little bit about what you've been doing at Best Buy, what drove it, and how it's working?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things where I'd say I think there's sort of a non-marketing element. As a retailer, we recognize the most important metric for us is our NPS score, our customer satisfaction score. So one of the things that we've done over the last 3 years is really focus on that. And I'd say we focus on that as much as a company as we do on the P&L, all the way down to the store level. So it's critically important that every phase along the process we're delivering a great customer experience, because we feel that's what's most likely to generate the next customer experience. So that's where it starts. I actually spend a lot of my time as a marketer sort of as an advocate for that across the organization. And then the second thing is on the measurement of media, creative, and of overall marketing. It's really hard. It's still really hard. You mentioned it earlier. We actually have 3 different approaches now. We have a sort of a last click, like you mentioned, and we have 2 other solutions that we use. And we don't have one that's sort of the master. We essentially look at all of them. And as we run our campaigns, some are better for measuring digital, for example. Some are better with traditional. But we look for things where all 3 of those are generally moving in the right direction. I think as it evolves, we'll probably get to a more sophisticated world where there is one that's sort of a master, but that means a pretty elusive goal for us.
Yes, if you had to envision the future, what would Nirvana be for you in terms of measurement? What would you like to be able to do?
Yeah, I think Nirvana would be a perfect multi-channel tracking and attribution system. So tracking's already really hard. It's so hard to tell when you're on your desktop, have you seen a TV spot? And then what are you doing on your mobile? Did you visit a store? In order to really have a good multi-channel attribution system, you kind of need to be able to connect all those dots. That remains pretty hard. And we're talking to you and a bunch of other folks about how to help us do that a little bit better. And so that's a big piece of it. And then I think the other thing is we just need to empower our teams to take the data and leverage it. So we've actually distributed decision rights and power across the marketing organization. I actually try to make as few decisions as possible. And what I do is I encourage the teams, look at the data that you have available and then make decisions quickly based upon that.
Yeah, and Kristin, you talk about making decisions on the fly earlier as well. But you've also challenged in other conversations that we need to push the boundaries on the metrics that we use today. How are you thinking about the metrics today and the metrics that might be there for us in the future?
Yeah, well, I think we're always going to have a blend of, syndicated metrics that the industry can agree on. But I think where we're headed is that the opportunity to have real-time, transactional, and performance data is going to be increasingly valuable to all of us. And that is going to be, to some degree, what's going to drive our decision-making. And I think the closer we push the industry and our own organizations to embrace that, the better off we'll all do as organizations in driving profitability and improving business outcomes.
Absolutely. So we're all here at CES. Everybody wants to both get excited about something, but also take away, right, something they could do. If you had to think about one thing in this pivot to mobile that you'd like the marketers in this room to do, what would it be? Why don't we start with you, Greg?
Yeah, I think the pivot to mobile kind of goes back to what I said earlier. Customers don't think of channels as independent anymore. And I think our challenge as marketers is how do you take all these experiences and how do you align them together and how do you make them better together? And we're still experimenting with that. We're in the very early stages. We have a lot more work to do there, but I think it's really important.
Absolutely.
I think as we think about it, whether it's mobile or any challenge that's coming at us, right, our world is moving so fast. If it's mobile today, it could be something else tomorrow. One of the things that we talk a lot about is being a great partner and seeking the best partners in the industry that are going to help us achieve the bold ambitions that we've set. And I think you guys, Margo, at Google have been terrific with us about that. You've pushed us, you've made us uncomfortable, you've encouraged us to take even bigger risks. And I think for an organization like ours that is, a big, complex, global organization, we recognize we have, big requirements, whether that's in mobile, data, you name it, across the board. But we're really looking to engage because no single organization has the answers, and we're living in an environment where we're always bringing on partners, whether that's in the creation of a platform, whether that's in a significant role in how we're going to market. Nothing today is done without great partners around us, and I'd say whether it's in mobile or other things, it's hugely important.
Yeah, that ecosystem idea that I think we're all even seeing here at CES. Everything is connected, and we all have to think not just within our silos, but all the places that we can bring new information, new insights, and aggregate that to get to better answers. So I want to thank you all for coming and joining us for this panel today. Thank you.
Thank you.